Hello, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, live edition. I normally record my podcast while I'm on the road in my layover hotel. I call it my mobile studio. But today I'm recording here at my my home in what I call Studio 1A. It's in my basement, my man cave. And right now I have probably the next hour sound and commotion free in the house. But after that, all bets are off. I think my daughter will be coming home from school. We might actually hear from Cedric squawking. Who knows what we'll hear? But for now, it's nice and silent, so I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm also using YouTube, actually Google Plus Hangouts on Air to do the recording, which is actually a lot easier for me instead of doing it the way that I normally do. This way, I don't have to do a lot of editing. So maybe just a little bit. Now that I think about it, I'm going to have to edit in something at the very end. Well, we'll see how that works. But it should cut down on the editing tasks for me as far as post-show processing. And again, if you've never seen me or heard of me, I'm a captain for a major legacy U.S. airline, and I do this show every week. It's called the Airline Pilot Guy Show. You can see right here, Airline Pilot Guy. And it's mainly an audio podcast, but many people like to watch me record the show. So that's what you're doing right now. So let me make sure that the audio recorder is recording. It is. And let's get this thing going. What do you say? All right, here we go. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 146.
Flight 209, are you clear for takeoff? Roger. LA departure 123.9. Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 1A in the Airline Pilot Guy headquarters building in beautiful downtown Roswell, Georgia. In today's episode, can pigs fly, bomb threats, a controller talks down a VFR pilot, and much, much more. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 146 is ready for pitchback. Hello and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, a show produced by and hosted by me, Captain Jeff. I'm a line pilot for a major U.S. legacy carrier, and this is my way of giving back to all the great things that I've experienced in my aviation career. Just a quick synopsis. I was in the military, the U.S. Air Force. Before I became an airline pilot, I spent a little bit more than 7 years flew the C-141, and I was a T-37 instructor pilot. And then I got hired by this legacy carrier. And actually, let's see, today I'm recording it on the 3rd of December. So in 12 days, I will be celebrating my 26th anniversary at Acme Airlines. I don't use the real name of my airline, but it's been a great run so far. I'm a captain on an MD-88 and MD-90 series airplane based here in Atlanta. So that's me, and I do this show because I have a lot of fun doing it. I get to interact with a lot of great people like you listening right now. Aviation enthusiasts, fellow pilots, the whole gamut out there. And as I said, it's I do this really more for myself than for you, but I'm glad that you're listening and watching and enjoying it. So let's see. Since the last episode, I was in Canton, Ohio, when I recorded episode 145. And I got home the next day in the afternoon, and I was home Saturday night and Sunday, and then Sunday evening I went out, got called out for a What I thought was going to be a 2-day, just one leg out, one leg back, because that's what I thought I was asking for. But actually, I asked for a trip that had 2 duty periods and just one leg per duty period. And that's what they gave me. But I was actually gone for 3 days. Well, not actually 3 days. Left Sunday night. I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina, all day on Monday. And then on Tuesday morning early, flew one leg back to Atlanta. And basically, they paid me for doing a 3-day trip, even though I was only gone, 24, 36 hours, something like that. So, yeah, it was a very sweet deal. And I have a request in for more flying. In fact, during the show, my phone might ring and they might say, "Hey, Jeff, we need you at the airport to do this or that." So I'm ready to go, pretty much. Need to put my uniform together and maybe. No, I guess I'm not really ready. Oh, well, hopefully I'll have time to repack my bag and get my uniform all ready and heading down to the airport if they do call me while I'm recording the show. My next scheduled event is Saturday night. Again, I had this standing request to pick up some flying this first week of December. And I received a text message from my company that said that I was going to be flying an out and back on Saturday night. And I thought, I must have messed up because I really didn't want to fly that late at night. But anyway, I'm going to do it because they signed it to me and I apparently asked for it. And so I looked at it and I'm thinking, well, we're going from Atlanta to Tuscaloosa, and then Tuscaloosa back to Atlanta. And the flight is scheduled to leave the Atlanta International Airport at 10 o'clock. And then I don't get home until a little bit after midnight. So I'm thinking, Tuscaloosa, Atlanta, the Alabama Crimson Tide, perhaps? Yeah, they're playing on Saturday, sometime on Saturday, earlier in the day, I guess, the Southeastern Conference Championship game. And so I guess we'll be taking them back home after the game. And so that should be sort of fun. So anyway, I downloaded I'm not going to show you, the charter packet that they give us for the flights, and gives all kinds of information about contacts and telephone numbers and the charts for Tuscaloosa Airport and airport diagram and that kind of stuff. And so I need to kind of do a little bit of studying and preparation work before I head out on Saturday evening to take the Crimson Tide football team back home. Hopefully it will be I don't know. I'm not sure if it'd be better if it were a successful outcome for the Crimson Tide. You'll remember I am an Auburn grad, and they kind of beat up on us on the Iron Bowl game, but I'm not going to hold that against them. But if they win the game against Missouri on Saturday, they'll probably be pretty rambunctious on the flight. If they lose, they'll be pretty somber, probably. So I'm not sure which I'd rather have. Really excited, exhilarated players, or very quiet, somber. I'll have to think about that. So that is what I have scheduled to do Saturday night. And then my next regularly scheduled trip is on Monday, a 4-day trip. So we'll see how that goes. And I'll hopefully fly before I head out on Saturday night. Okay, that's enough of that. I had a meetup with one of our listeners, Andre. He's from Switzerland, and he was here in the Atlanta area, the Roswell area to be exact. And he sent me an email about a week ago saying, hey, or a couple of weeks ago, hey, I'm going to be there around Thanksgiving time, and I'm going to be heading back in early December. Maybe we can get together. And I told him, well, my schedule is kind of up in the air, but sure, if we can, I'd certainly enjoy meeting you. And so yesterday morning, I returned from that trip to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I met with Andre at one of the local coffee roasters here in town, a very good coffee place called Thousand Hills Coffee Roasters, I think. And I recorded a little bit of our little meetup. So, and I apologize for the music in the background is the sound system of the coffee roaster coffee house place, and they're playing some Christmas music, and then you can hear the sounds of the coffee making machine, and etc. So let's take a listen. Hey folks, hope everybody's doing well. I'm with Andre Holzach. Did I do all right? He's going to say it.
Holzach.
Oh, yeah, I think he just spit on my windsock here. That's not a windsock. It's a windscreen. There we go. We're in Roswell, Georgia. Andre is, well, we won't go into a lot of details, but anyway, he's Swiss. He lives in Switzerland, but he's married to a lady from Georgia. And so they're kind of living a bi-country lifestyle, I guess. So he's here for the Thanksgiving holidays and heading back later this week. And he contacted me and said, hey, I'm going to be in the Roswell, Alpharetta area and would like to, have a cup of coffee or two with you. So we're here at 1000 Hills Coffee Company. Is that what it's called? 1000 Hills Coffee Roasters or something like that. Anyway, it's a great little local coffee shop here in Roswell, Georgia, and it's a beautiful setting. We've been already talking now for, I don't know, an hour and a half, and it feels like we've only been talking for about 15 minutes, but having a great time. And so what do you think about, well, you've been here to Roswell before, right?
I love this town. I've been here several times. I did the historic run on October. Maybe you know it. It is fun, and it's. I have to say, this is probably the best coffee I had in the States so far.
Oh, good. Yeah, it is good coffee. Haven't you been to Starbucks?
Starbucks is a big deal in Europe and in Switzerland especially.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? In a positive way?
They make a big deal out of it. Or younger Swiss people, that's my experience. They love Starbucks. It's kind of like a hype.
Yeah.
They definitely make good money out of it there.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can spend a lot of money at Starbucks, that's for sure. And by the way, I have a coffee fund, and a lot of that money that people donate to my coffee fund actually gets spent at Starbucks, and I do appreciate it. So thank you, all of you listening who are contributors to the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund. I didn't mean for it to be a commercial for coffee, though. But so people understand now that I do have a caffeine addiction, and we're enjoying great coffee here at 1000 Hills Coffee Roasters in Roswell. So anyway, tell us a little bit about you, Andre.
Well, I listen.
You've heard from. He sent me feedback several times, so I've mentioned his name several times here.
Just a few feedbacks. I hope I can contribute more feedbacks in the future. I listen now since June, July, so quite a while now. I try to get back to all the old episodes, and I love to listen to you when I'm running. You're really good when I'm running. It's a good motivation, and I learn a lot. And I hope my wife and I, we try to settle here in Roswell and try to find a nice place here. And I hope we can be neighbors and have more coffee sessions.
Yeah, I just found out this morning that he is going to be possibly one of my neighbors here in the Roswell area. And Ray Williams is up in Alpharetta. He's another neighbor. He helped coordinate the Airline Pilot Guy get-together meetup at Petrie DeKalb Petrie Airport a few months back. We had a grand time. So anyway, yeah, we hope to see more and more of Andre, and hope everything works out for your job situation and your housing situation and all that kind of stuff, your life situation.
It's going to be complicated, but it's an adventure, and I can say Georgia is just beautiful, beautiful wintertime, crispy weather, and
yeah, but we don't have the mountains like the Alps and the.
You have the oldest mountains in the world, the Appalachians. So
yeah, but they're not very impressive. Well, I mean, they're impressive in their own way, But what was I going to say? Oh. Probably didn't mention that Andre is also a pilot for an airline in Switzerland.
That's correct. It's Helvetic Airways, Fokker 100 I fly, and we have also an Airbus, and now it's transitioning over to Embraer jets. Unfortunately, I don't get the pleasure to fly those jets. I heard they're really nice. A lot of regionals here in the States have them.
Yeah, they're very popular here.
Yeah, it's a good aircraft. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I just wanted to kind of give you a little slice of what it's like when I'm not flying my trips. I get to meet up with listeners like Andre, and perhaps in the future, maybe you too. So anything else before we sign off?
Clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds at the appropriate times.
There you go. Thank you. And to you as well. All right. So that was a great time yesterday. We spent about 2.5 hours yakking and drinking great coffee. And again, not the Thousand, it's Land of 1,000 Hills Coffee Company. And I'll put the link to Land of 1,000 Hills Coffee Company in the show notes. And by the way, it's landof1000hills.com. And we were at the Roswell location. And he gave me a couple gifts of Swiss chocolate. This is one of the ones. The other one is over in my chair behind the computer. But this is a Toblerone, and has a map of Switzerland, a relief map. Never seen anything like this before in chocolate. So if you hear me chomping on something, it's this nice little miniature Toblerone candy. Okay, let's move on, shall we? Let's see, what do I want to do next? Got to head over here to my notes. Yeah, that's about it. So I guess we should probably play this.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
Yes, it's time to talk about the coffee fund, since we were just in the coffee shop there. I actually do love coffee, and you can help with my caffeine addiction, as well as help offset some of the costs of doing the show. Web hosting costs, media server costs. I have people helping me out, like Arash in Canada, Ottawa. He is doing a fantastic job with the website management. And by the way, speaking of that, check it out if you haven't yet already. Sign up for the Aviation Geeks, the section of the website where it's kind of like a Facebook hub, a place for creating your own groups and having communications with other Airline Pilot Guy community members. And in the future, I believe we're going to be starting a forum there as well. So we'll probably be recruiting volunteers to be moderators and that kind of thing. So yeah, lots of great stuff over there at airlinepilotguy.com. Thank you, Arash. So that's just an example of some of the things that cost money. Now, the show is free for you, and it always will be. But if you'd like to help out with helping me offset some of the costs of doing the show, you may by contributing to the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund. Remember, it is not tax deductible. I'm not a charitable organization, although some people may look at me and think, oh, what a charity he must be. But no. So if you want to learn more about it, head over to airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since the last show, Vernon and Paul have contributed to the fund. So thank you guys for doing that, and everybody that has contributed in the past. Again, to find out more about ways you can help, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And this is the Ink Spots, recorded in 1940.
Oh, throw me that slug from the wonderful mud. I've got a rug till I'm snug in the jug.
Time for the news. Okay, this from listener and friend Chris in Hartford, Connecticut. He sent me a link to an article, When Pigs Fly, Not on This Plane. And U.S. Airways crew ordered a disruptive pig off of a plane this week, adding a tasty new chapter to the annals of holiday travel and likely a million riffs on the phrase, when pigs fly. A passenger on a U.S. Airways flight leaving Connecticut's Bradley International Airport brought a pig on board Wednesday as an emotional support animal. The passenger and her pig left the flight after crew members decided the animal had to leave because of its disorderly behavior, according to a spokeswoman for U.S. Airways parent American Airlines. A fellow passenger, University of Massachusetts professor Jonathan Skolnick, told the Associated Press he at first thought the passenger was carrying a duffel bag, but an odor clarified the situation. It's no duffel bag, but rather a rather stout pig on a leash, he wrote in an email. Am I dreaming? The woman who sat next to him tied the leash to the armrest, he said. He estimated that the pig weighed between 50 and 70 pounds. That's a big pig. Well, I guess that's not really big for a pig. He said that things got worse, which actually means better for late night talk show hosts drooling over the comedic mix of barnyard animals and air travel. Well, he said to the Associated Press, the pig is incontinent. He was pooping all over the place and oinking and running back and forth. The owner tried to control his behavior and clean up after the animal before the crew said, you know what? Don't think so. The this pig may be giving you emotional support, but it is giving emotionally terrorizing everybody else on board. So what are they going to think of next? Emotional support pigs. And I've seen so many animals out there on board the airplane now that are emotional support animals. I mean, I think we need to crack down on that. It's getting a little out of hand, in my opinion. Okay, let's see here. Fighter jets scramble into the skies over Austria after Turkish Airlines, a pilot on a Turkish Airlines flight, inadvertently triggers the hijack alert on a flight from Frankfurt to Istanbul. Let's see. The pilot inadvertently sparked widespread panic after he triggered a hijack alarm during a flight from Frankfurt to Istanbul. Fearing the plane had been commandeered by terrorists, Austria's military deployed 2 fighter jets to escort the Boeing 737 to Vienna International Airport. The incident occurred Friday afternoon after the pilot requested permission to divert to Vienna and make an emergency landing. So apparently they had some kind of a pressurization problem. And one of the things that we do when we declare an emergency is put in a special code in our transponder unit. And apparently he put in the wrong code. He basically said that they desired armed intervention. Basically, they were being hijacked, and that was not the correct code. And then they finally put the right code in there and got the whole thing sorted out. After, of course, the Austrian fighter jets were scrambled to intercept the flight. Oopsie. And let's see. American Airlines had a jet from Barcelona after landing safely at John F. Kennedy International in New York, was asked to proceed to an uninhabited area of the airport where the flight parked, and then they got all of the 200 passengers and 9 crew members on board the airplane. They took them off the airplane, and then a bomb squad unit, K9 units, and emergency services were dispatched and did a search of the airplane just to make sure that there were no bombs on board. And the FBI told ABC News that no explosives were found and the airport was cleared, or I guess what they mean to say is the flight was cleared. It is unclear who made the threat and how it was made. A lot of people were a little irked and ticked off by the inconvenience, but hey, it wasn't the airline's fault. It was whatever the prankster was that it was his or her fault for calling in that false bomb threat. But the good news is that everybody's safe and sound. And this is also the Turkish Airlines flight. I already talked about that. Let's see. The FAA administrator was appearing on CNN's State of the Union. And FAA Administrator Michael Huerta said on Sunday his agency is working to regulate drones throughout the country to ensure the safety of all aircraft. He acknowledged the 25 instances of where unmanned aircraft have interfered with manned flights. We talked about that on the last show. To ensure safety of passenger flights and smaller aircraft, he said the Federal Aviation Administration is trying to teach those who may receive an unmanned aircraft as a holiday present that there are rules. These are not your typical pilots that may be flying one of these for the first time. Let's see. These are not your typical pilots that may be flying one of these for the first time. So a big part of what we're doing is educating. Oh, I see what he's saying. The people flying these things, that they're going to be receiving these things as gifts, are not pilots for the most part. So they need to educate them that there is a 400-foot flight ceiling and a prohibition on flying drones near an airport, and within 5 miles of an airport to be exact. Huerta is said that the FAA is working on a staged integration to possibly allow commercial use of unmanned aircraft, starting with lower risk uses and then moving on to other applications. There are proponents of unmanned aircraft, and they see huge potential of this technology, and for them, we can't move fast enough. What they would like to see is free and open use of unmanned aircraft as soon as we can get there. On the other side, he said, we have pilots, commercial pilots and general aviation pilots, who are very concerned that these are difficult to see and they don't really have a good understanding of how they interact with other aircraft. Yeah, I would consider myself in that group. I'm not against drones. I think they have a lot of great uses, but there have to be rules that allow for the safe separation and coexistence of the passenger flights and general aviation flights and these drone flights as well. So that's what they're trying to come up with. They're working hard to come up with some regulations. Did you see this or hear about this? This is happened in Houston not too long ago, and this is from khou.com, and they did a little television report about an incident. Here, I'll let them tell you about it. Used without permission.
The holiday
Oh,
season is here.
well, wait a minute. Before we do that, let's watch this Volkswagen commercial. And if you do go to Volkswagen, make sure that you mention Captain Jeff and the Airline Pilot Guy show, and I'll get 10% of the purchase. I wish. No, not really.
Area pilot cheated death last weekend when he found himself trapped above the clouds, unable to see the ground.
This was scary. His only way down, putting his life and the lives of people on the ground in the hands of an air traffic controller.
Our Jeremy Diesel has his story.
In the cockpit of his small plane, Mark Nelson tried not to panic.
You can see the instruments. I couldn't even see the propeller. And that's like 5 feet away. It was that bad.
At Houston's Regional Air Traffic Control, they could see the problem.
There was no airport around within several hundred miles that was visual conditions.
Just thousands of feet of clouds. Pilots have to be specially licensed to fly in those conditions for good reason.
Your body is telling you one thing and the instruments are telling you something else.
Houston Control made the call.
Because then it really is just a wing and a prayer at that point.
Correct.
Hugh McFarland would talk Mark Nelson to the ground through 8,000 feet of clouds.
It's just moment to moment.
All captured on ATC tapes, starting at 8,500 feet, 20 minutes total, flying blind.
Okay, just fly that 020 heading for a little bit longer, and just wings level.
Except for the calm voice in his head.
Just relax and breathe. Just relax. You're doing fine. Just keep the wings level.
Plenty to do.
And it'll point you right at the TME airport.
They thought the clouds might break at about 2,000 feet.
You're about out of the clouds now.
Or 1,000.
Do you have a ground contact?
Negative.
But they didn't.
You're lined up with the runway now. Just make the slight left turn.
But still blind. Finally.
Okay, I see the ground.
I saw some homes, about 800 feet below me.
Seeing anything, a gift.
Yeah, it was just hallelujah. No, I mean, really.
Not the only answered prayer.
Let me know when you see the airport. And you're all clear to land on runway 36.
I only had a few hundred feet to spare. With Hugh's help, I'm glad to be here. I'm not Maverick. I'm just the guy that flies back and forth to Kerrville every week. I'm that guy.
Now just thankful to still be able to fly at all. Jeremy Diesel, KHOU 11 News.
Please hand in your certificate to the local FAA office as soon as possible. So yeah, this guy, I'm glad that Hugh, the air traffic controller, was able to talk this guy down. That's good news. He is safe and sound, but perhaps Mark might consider getting some training for instrument flying so that he can be appropriately rated to fly in these conditions, and then he won't require anybody to talk him down. So anyway, I'm glad that he made it through the situation well, and congratulations to the controller for talking him down and keeping him from losing control of the airplane. But again, really, Mark, you need to go out there and get your instrument rating so that we won't have to worry about you out there. Okay, let's continue with NTSB. They were in the news this week, and bad battery design again in the Boeing 787. The NTSB blames bad battery design and bad management in Boeing 787 fires. The maker of lithium-ion batteries didn't foresee spreading short-circuit danger. And this is a good article in Ars Technica. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. It's well worth reading. I'll just read a couple little segments of the article. The bad battery design and bad engineering practices were to blame for the fire aboard a Japan Airlines Boeing 787 in Boston in 2013, according to a final report on the incident issued by the National Transportation Safety Board yesterday. The NTSB found fault not only with the manufacturer of the battery, but with Boeing and the FAA as well. In a prepared statement, Acting Chairman Christopher A. Hart said the investigation identified deficiencies in the design and certification processes that should have prevented an outcome like this. Fortunately, this incident occurred while the airplane was on the ground and with firefighters immediately available. So just as a refresher, there are two battery systems aboard the 787. The main battery in the front of the aircraft, which powers the 787's ground maintenance systems and provides backup power to the aircraft's control systems, and another set of batteries at the aft end of the aircraft used to start the 787's auxiliary power unit. Both fires were the result of thermal runaway. The batteries became overheated to the point where a chemical reaction was triggered and released even more heat, causing a cascading effect that caused the batteries to explode or catch fire. And let's see here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And basically, part of what led Boeing and the FAA failing to catch manufacturing issues at GS Yuasa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, it's a Japanese company making the battery, was the way that the 787 was built. The electrical systems for the 787 were outsourced to Thales, which in turn was responsible for managing each of its own suppliers and ensuring they met Boeing standards. But Thales apparently made some changes to things in its systems without a Boeing sign-off. And GS Yuasa made some changes of its own that deviated from Boeing and Thales instructions. And apparently there were not audits to find any of these problems. Most of the non-compliance items at GS Yuasa involved adherence to written procedures and communication. And so anyway, it goes on into a little bit more detail about what exactly caused the batteries to thermally run away, etc. So again, that report, that article will be in the show notes, and in the article it also has a link to the PDF document, the final report from the NTSB. I saw this on one of my websites that I look at. An Air Tindy pilot is being hailed a hero for landing his Cessna safely on ice near Yellowknife. People in the aviation world are commending an Air Tindy pilot for landing a Cessna 208 Caravan safely Thursday on the ice of Great Slave Lake outside Yellowknife. A preliminary report to Transport Canada said the plane took off at 6:44 a.m., dark, for Fort Simpson. About 22 minutes later, the pilot requested clearance to return to Yellowknife due to icing. About 13 minutes later, the pilot made a Mayday distress call due to severe icing. The plane went down about 1 minute later. 6 people on board were airlifted safely to Yellowknife several hours later. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police said that the Cessna suffered damage to its landing gear, but the plane was largely intact. And here's a quote from a retired military pilot with 50 years of experience and a former flight safety officer with Transport Canada. His name is Jock Williams. Jock, that's what I should change my name to. Jock Nielsen. No. He says, the pilot should be congratulated beyond all belief. He did something that very few pilots do in equivalent circumstances. He took the opportunity to land the aircraft while it was still flyable, and he deserves some sort of medal for so doing. At least on the last part of his action, he's a hero. Yeah. In other words, maybe he should have done a little bit more planning and briefing and analyzing the weather before he took off, and then he wouldn't have been in this situation to begin with. So this might be a case of judgment and skill. And of course, the optimum is to have good judgment and good skill. Apparently, he used bad judgment to get into the situation and good skill to have a successful outcome of the situation. And I can name several cases of this kind of thing happening. I mean, one that comes to mind is years ago in Atlanta. Nobody was taking off because there was a line of severe weather to the north of the airport, and a was it ValueJet at the time? I think it was. A ValueJet pilot decided that he would take off and fly into this mess, and we were all just astonished that anybody would even consider taking off in these conditions. And he did, and guess what happened? He got into some severe hail. It took out the windscreen and did quite a bit of damage to the DC-9, which he limped back to the Atlanta airport and landed safely, and everybody hailed him as a hero. Unfortunately for him, I believe that his certificate was relieved from him. It was lifted from him after the FAA did a little investigating and found that he could have killed everybody on board for his wanton disregard of safety by taking off in those conditions and putting everybody in that situation to begin with. So again, bad judgment, good flying skills, good outcome in this case, could have been a bad outcome. Same goes with this icing incident in Yellowknife. The Cessna Caravan plane took off with a freezing drizzle warning in effect for the Yellowknife area. Jock says that pilots aren't supposed to take off in icing conditions, and they have an obligation to check weather. He said that ice weighs a plane down, yeah, interferes with its lift, yes, and makes it difficult to control, yes. There is no de-icing equipment in the world installed on that aircraft that would handle moderate to heavy icing or freezing drizzle or freezing rain. We simply stay on the ground when we're faced with those circumstances because no aircraft is certified to handle it or capable of handling it. And they said the reason why it took several hours before the people were saved or recovered is that the 3 helicopters that went out there to get them had to wait for the icing conditions to go away so that they could safely go out there and get these people. So, yeah, what are you going to say about that? I think enough said from me, right? And finally, I was looking through some of the interesting recordings on liveatc.net, and I heard this.
Edison Tower, 533 Mike Charlie, inbound, let's say 6 miles out for a full top at 2,000.
Addison Tower.
Cherokee 533 Mike Charlie, Edison Tower, continue for 15. Understand you have smoke in the cockpit, but you're not declaring an emergency, sir?
There was smoke, it cleared out. The squawk report on this plane reported earlier that there was some smoke, but it was looked at.
Cherokee 3 Mike Charlie, roger. I just want to confirm, approach, you told me you're not declaring an emergency. I just want to make sure that that is the case.
Yes, sir, I am not declaring an emergency.
Cherokee 3 Mike Charlie, roger. Let me know if that changes. For now, continue for 15. You're following a citation at 525, 2.5 mile final.
2.5 mile final, following citation. I have visual on airport, I believe.
Station 3 Mike Charlie, number 2 following the citation, runway 15, clear to land. BD-817, we got your departure. Can you take an immediate citation 2 mile final?
Big D-817, affirmative.
BD-817, runway 15, full line clear for immediate takeoff.
Clear for immediate takeoff, runway 15, Big D-817, there we go.
Station 6 Charlie got an IFR Bonanza punching him out in front of you. He's been waiting 17 minutes for his release.
Got him in sight, 6 Charlie.
Thank you.
Edison Tower, I do not have visual on citation. Am I to number 2? Just to be my colleague?
Cherokee 3 Mike Charlie, citation mile final, no factor at all, sir. Runway 15, clear to land. Wind 200 at 15, gust 24.
That's the weather. Clear to land, runway 15, 5 to be my colleague. Big D-817, right, can you make that left turn to 050?
Big D-817, yes sir, stuck the left turn to 050.
There you go, 050, Big D-817.
Big Day 17, contact regional departure. There's a couple of VFRs about 5 east of you at 2500.
Oh, departure, Big Day 17.
Addison Tower, Piaggio 183 Alpha Victor is visual to runway 15.
Piaggio 183 Alpha Victor, Addison Tower, continue for 15.
Continuing Alpha Victor.
Station 65 Charlie, left turn air Foxtrot on Alpha and go around point 6. See ya.
See ya, 65 Charlie.
Piaggio 3 Alpha Victor, go around. I have a disabled aircraft on the runway.
3 Alpha Victor going around.
Cherokee 523 Mike Charlie, asking we got the crew rolling.
Would like me to orbit here over 121.
6 pop up, all right. Who's asking about orbiting over 121?
67 Juliet, Whiskey with you over 121.
Piaggio 3 Alpha Victor, fly runway heading, maintain 2000, contact regional departure 1243.
Runway heading 2000, 3 Alpha Victor.
Pan. 550 Mike Charlie, I have crashed and I am unable to exit the plane.
Cherokee 3 Mike Charlie, roger, we have the crew rolling. All right, any aircraft inbound signal numbers?
67 Juliet Whiskey.
I have a 67 Juliet Whiskey Addison Tower. For now, I have just continued towards the field. You start your descent, and we have the disabled aircraft on the runway. I'm unable to let you land. I'll give you instructions momentarily.
7 Juliet Whiskey, roger.
Piaggio 3 Alpha Victor, contact regional departure.
Data frequency for Alpha Victor.
2 Alpha Victor, 1243. Piaggio 3 Alpha Victor, 124.3.
Addison Tower, 550 Mike Charlie. Not to clog the line, but I have a busted wing and the door is jammed and my kids are in here. I want to make sure that there's no gas and fire issue.
533 Mike Charlie, roger. We have the crash crew rolling. They know that you guys are trapped in the aircraft, and all I can do is get them moving faster.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware.
And Tower, Malibu 465 Mike, we'd like to go over to approach and we'll just divert over to McKinney.
Malibu 465 Mike, roger. Contact approach 1243.
243, thank you, and good luck.
Okay, that's enough of that. So apparently, I'm scratching my head a little bit. 533 Mike Charlie, a Piper Cherokee, single-engine airplane. I think it's a 6-place airplane coming in for landing, and there's some kind of discussion about smoke in the inside the airplane. And then he says, well, that was something that was written up earlier, but they somehow cleared the write-up, and it was no longer an issue. So I'm not sure why the controller at this point, the tower controller, would have any idea of some kind of a situation involving an earlier write-up. But apparently something is going on in this airplane. And that's why he says, understand you're not declaring an emergency. And he says, yeah, I'm not declaring an emergency. So if something really is happening, or even if you did have some smoke and it cleared up, that would still be an emergency in my book. Got to get the airplane on the ground. And he's got his kids on the airplane. So let's use our common sense here and get the airplane on the ground, get emergency services standing by in case something bad happens, which apparently it did. Now, I believe, based on some of the research I did about this accident or incident, that the whatever issue that they were talking about, the smoke in the airplane, had nothing to do with why this guy crashed. Witnesses say that the airplane, and by the way, there was a very, as you probably heard the tower controller mention, that the winds were gusting to like 24 knots or something like that. A pretty good crosswind. And apparently witnesses say that he landed hard, it bounced, and then probably the wind caught a wing, and that's how he ended up crashing. So that was an interesting one, and one that I'd hope that none of us would want to find ourselves in, especially if we have kids on board the airplane and you have a broken wing, you can't get out. Also, another consideration for those of you out there who fly general aviation aircraft, might want to have one of those devices, and I'm not sure what they're called, where you can, pierce through plexiglass to get, a hole in the window and get out of the airplane if your door is jammed or whatever. I know they have a name. I just can't think of the name right now, but they do make these devices that will help you get out of these kind of situations if you're stuck like this guy was. So anyway, hopefully we'll learn more about exactly what happened there to that Cherokee crash in Addison, Texas. So, well, enough of that. It is time to move on to the best part of the show, which of course is your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
Let's see where to start. Let's start with my very first piece of feedback that I received since the last episode, and it is audio feedback with accompanying pictures, which I'll have on the in the show notes at airlinepilotguy.com. And so let's listen to what they have to say here.
Hey, Captain Jeff. This is Evan from Australia.
Hey, Evan.
Long-time listener. Today I'm giving you some voice feedback from 6,500 feet over a little town called Dalesford. I'm here with my friend Shane, and he's a listener as well. Hi, Captain Jeff. We're in the Technam E2002, and we're just been to the Wings Awards and a little trip not far from Melbourne called Lilydale, and we're on our way back to Ballarat. Won't be long before I have to start my descent. Just thought I'd say hello, and thank you for all your good work, and keep it coming. Thanks again.
Awesome. I always enjoy feedback from you guys. Yeah, weren't you the ones that, well, I think you're the ones that gave me the feedback from the balloon, right? Yeah. So anyway, again, just to, in case you didn't understand what he was saying, he said Evan's with his friend Shane. They're flying over the town of Dalesford, while flying the Flying Club's Technam P2002 from Lilydale back home to Ballarat. And there's a picture of Evan and Shane in the airplane giving me a thumbs up. And let's see, a picture of the airplane on the ramp. Very cool. Thank you guys for taking the time to do that. And again, I'll have the picture of them in the show notes. So thanks a lot, guys. Carl from Iceland says, first of all, thank you for your podcast. I'm still enjoying every minute of it. You're welcome, Carl. There are some routes that call for medium to long-range narrow-body aircraft, such as the 757. It seems like the newest versions of the 737 or the current A320s don't have the range and fuel efficiency needed for these routes. At least I'm not seeing them flying them. Airbus recently announced that a long-range version of the A320neo is on the drawing table, and that some of the major companies in the States are already showing interest. So I think Boeing needs to put down a plan real fast if they don't want to lose those customers in the need of a 757 replacement. As always, clear skies, happy holidays, and God bless. Carl. Thank you, Carl. I agree. And, you know, one of the problems out there, I think that Boeing kind of build the 737 900 airplane, or that variation of the 737 series, as a replacement possibly for a 757. At least it carries about the same amount of passengers. The Airbus 321 is another jet that is holding approximately the same capacity as the 757. But from what I'm hearing out there, both the Airbus 321 and the Boeing 737-900 just aren't giving the performance that the airlines have been requesting, and so they're kind of dogs, to put it mildly. And a lot of people think, gosh darn, too bad that Boeing didn't basically destroy all the assembly jigs for the 757 assembly line, and they could have made more 757s with some kind of a new engine option, like a 730 or 757 Max or 757 Neo, to use Airbus's terminology, to kind of fill in the gap here and replace some of these older 757s. But alas, doesn't look like that's going to happen. So it will be interesting to see how the airlines end up, solving this problem. Again, that 757 is great for some of these routes, long-range routes that don't have a lot of passengers. But it doesn't seem that there's anything out there capable of replacing that model to do these kind of flights. So that's all I know about it, Carl. Don't have any other information about it, but maybe somebody listening does that can chime in. Bill in Victoria said, I heard your comments on Leslie Nielsen in episode 144 in response to Sim Captain Bruce. In addition to his aviation fame for his role in Airplane, he has some real-life aviation heritage. He enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force at age 17 and trained as aircrew in World War II. His family has a little bit more military heritage. I'm looking up at my commissioning scroll, signed by his brother Eric Nielsen, Eric with a K, who was Canada's Minister of National Defense when I got my commission in 1985. A little bit more Canadian trivia for the airline pilot guy, Bill in Victoria. Well, thank you. That's great to see. I had no idea that Leslie Nielsen had experience in aviation. That's cool. Very cool. And God rest his, or may his soul rest in peace. We miss you, Leslie. What a great comedian. And thank you, Bill. Okay, this is from Chris Johnson. He said, looks like WestJet has done it again. They made some Christmas wishes come true for some deserving people. And if you follow me on Facebook, Airline Pilot Guy, I put this a link to this video there, and I'll also have a link to it in the show notes if you want to check it out. But WestJet has some pretty creative ways of celebrating Christmas. They've done. I think this is the third year now that they've done this, and this is one that they made down in the Dominican Republic, and basically brought Christmas and Christmas gifts to one of the local communities there in the Dominican Republic. So check it out. It's a very heartwarming story. Bhavesh writes, hope you are well, sir. I wanted to share some pictures with the Airline Pilot Guy community. My wife and I flew to Mombasa on their east coast, 45 minutes from Nairobi. It was an absolute perler of a morning. Pity I wasn't in the cockpit. It was absolute magic. We took off on runway 6, maintained runway heading until 10,000, or actually flight level 100. Right turn, view of Mount Kenya as we turn right. And he has the photo here. Beautiful. It's the highest mountain in Kenya, second highest in Africa, standing at 5,199 meters. Mount Kilimanjaro, just before the top of descent. Kili is the highest mountain in Africa, standing at 5,895 meters, which, for those of us who don't understand what that means, is 19,340 feet. It was the sort of day where you feel really blessed to be alive. Thanks, Captain Jeff. Keep up the good work. And I have some audio feedback following, which we're going to hear momentarily. But these pictures are just beautiful. So more pictures to look at in the show notes at airlinepilotguide.com for episode 146. Let's see. He sent this in. This is also Bhavesh. Just a little snippet of someone asking for diversion due weather. We were in the Kinshasa FIR Cumulonimbus HQ. Kinshasa do not have the best VHF coverage, thus we can't hear his readback. Oh, so here, this is the audio feedback regarding that. Okay, I guess that's Bhavesh in their flight asking for weather avoidance due to the very strong CVs that they see on the horizon. And then, of course, this is the actual feedback to which he was referring. And let's see, let's hear what Bhavesh has to say.
This is take 2 on the audio feedback. Captain Jeff. Sorry, this is Bhavesh. Hope you're well. This audio feedback is from 37,000 feet. We are presently overflying the Congo. Amazing views outside the Congo forest and bits of open space. Some scary looking CVs out to our right. Luckily, our path looks clear for now anyway. The company the airline I fly for, we have 4 different versions of the 737. We have the classic, class 6, the passenger version and the freighter version. Today I'm in the freighter version. And then we have the 2 versions of the NGs, the 700 and the 800. Much prefer flying the NGs just because, well, it's a newer plane. It's cleaner, it's smarter, bigger sort of TV screens, quieter, and makes life much easier flying that, really. But hey, this pays the bills as well, flying the 737-300 Classic, the freighter, as I am today. Just talking about D-rates, just finishing up the D-rate topic. On the 737-700, below a certain weight, we actually are required to do a 24K D-rate. It has a 26K engine on that. We have the same one on the 737-800. However, the 700 is about 10 tons or so, 9 tons, 10 tons lighter than the 800. Therefore, with those big engines and a lighter plane, we need to derate depending on altitude and temperature. Talking about ITCZs, as Rick did, and his last feedback, I was quite impressed with the similarity in the SIGWEX and the actual weather they had. It looked very close to real time, that SIGWEX. Quite impressed with that. And this part of the world we fly in, we don't really get very accurate weather forecasts. But yeah, we got the weather radar, so that does the trick. Additionally, I had a question for Rick. I'm just curious as to the difference between flying a passenger plane and a freighter, a cargo plane full time. I'm just wondering, does he fly the 777 freighter out of choice? Yeah, that's all. Thank you very much. Thanks for a good podcast, Captain Jet. Good day.
Thank you, Babish. I think I was saying Babish, but it's Babish. And Rick, so if you're listening, Babish had a question for you. So are you flying the freighter by choice, or, what's the deal with that? So, and I think I know the answer because Rick has talked about that with me, but we'll let Rick answer Babish in his own words. So thank you, Babish, for all the great feedback. And clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds, my friend. Brian writes, he said, I'm a fairly low-time private pilot, currently working towards my instrument rating, with a somewhat personal piece of feedback for you. He says, although please feel free to read it on the show. Maybe someday it will be useful to someone else in a similar circumstance. Around a month ago, a friend of mine was killed when his personal plane crashed just after takeoff. He was a multi-thousand-hour ATP flying for a large U.S. regional airline, and he had recently bought a share of the aircraft involved in the accident. Unfortunately, due to the post-crash fire, there was really not much left of the aircraft, so even though the FAA and NTSB launched an investigation, I doubt we'll ever definitely know the cause of the crash. Since his accident, I've completely lost any interest in getting back in the air. I haven't flown at all in well over a month now. It's not that I'm afraid of having an accident, but more than that, I just feel that I've lost the desire and the passion that I used to have for flying. I was wondering, over your long flying career, and especially in the military, have you ever had any friends or colleagues pass away in air accidents? If so, how did you get over it? The hardest part of this whole thing for me has not been his death per se. I know he died doing something he loved and something he was passionate about. However, after seeing the effect that his death had or has had on his family and friends, it really makes me question whether continuing to fly is worth it. I love flying. It's something I've always wanted to do since I was a small child, but I would never, ever want to put my family and friends through the grief and loss that I've seen over the last few weeks, no matter how passionate I am about something. I know you're Captain Jeff and not Dr. Jeff, so I'm not expecting you to solve all of my problems for me, but I was just thinking maybe you or one of your listeners had been through a similar circumstance in the past and could provide some tips or advice for how to rekindle your love and passion for flying after something like this has happened. Thanks, Brian. Well, Brian, first of all, my condolences to you and losing somebody close to you. And I can't say that I have shared that experience as far as losing somebody in the flying world. I have experienced the pain and suffering and mourning of losing somebody close to me, family members, in-laws, friends, even animals. But I've never. The only thing close to it is that a colleague of mine, who I went through C-141 training in Altus, Oklahoma, our initial training. He was assigned to another squadron, Charleston, I believe, and was over in the Naples, Italy area, taking off out of Sigonella, I believe. And they ended up having the catastrophic failure of one and then two same side engines on the airplane. And I think that some of the debris from the engine failure penetrated the wall of the fuselage and ignited a fire. And I think they were carrying some toxic like paint or something. And the fire that ensued with the smoke was toxic, and they basically lost control of the airplane. And, it was going to be bad enough, without having the fire and the smoke. I believe that's in my mind. That's the way I remember this whole incident occurring. And they lost that 141, and he lost his life. All people aboard did, and that was a little bit sobering. But again, he wasn't a personal friend of mine, so I didn't feel a strong reaction with that. And I guess maybe even starting from the very beginning in my military days, I kind of was prepared for something like this to happen. I mean, especially in the military, flying is not, it's definitely something that is filled with risk. And you kind of expect that, so you're going to experience something like this, that you're going to have somebody that maybe good friends with, die in a crash. And but that's as close to it that I've ever come. Now, as far as whether somebody loses their life in a flying accident or a car accident, I mean, let's just say that this event was your good friend dying on a highway accident. He was in his car and somehow got involved in an accident and lost his life. And it would be tough to see the family and friends go through this whole thing, right? But would that keep these people from getting in their cars and driving again? No. It's just in this case, the guy was killed flying an airplane. And why should that be any different than any other form of death? In my opinion, I don't see what the difference is. It's not how it happened. It's the fact that it happened, that he died, and that he is no longer sharing his life with you and his family. And so, I mean, that's why we mourn when somebody dies that we know. It's not that we feel sorry for them. We feel sorry for ourselves because we're not going to be experiencing his life here on Earth anymore. Chances are he's in a better place. We don't know for sure, but we always hope that for our friends and family that pass away and enter into their eternal life, if that's something you believe, which I do strongly. So when somebody in our family passes away, at first it may feel like we're mourning for them, but we're not. We're mourning for ourselves. We're mourning for the people that love them and we're close to them, because they're not going to have that person in their lives anymore. So to me, I don't really think it matters how he died. It's the fact that he died and the effect it has on everybody. And so I understand, though, that that's kind of made you a little bit numb when it comes to your zeal, your passion for flying. But I have no magic words to tell you that to make that passion come back. But I think just give it some time, and hopefully one of these days it'll come back to you. And if it doesn't, then so be it. Not everybody is. Flying is not for everybody. Don't be ashamed about that. If you never get that passion and that thrill for flying back, then I'd say let it go. Just do something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. But that's the only thing that I can say, acting like Dr. Phil. Obviously, I have no psychological or psychiatric training whatsoever. So that's the best I can do for you, Brian. Maybe somebody out there has experienced something similar to what you're experiencing, and maybe they can give some good words for you. But that's the best I can do. It's hard when we lose somebody that we love or we like a lot, and again, it's not because this person we feel like they're suffering anymore. It's that we're suffering because they're not with us. So that's my take. Hopefully that helped, Brian. And again, anybody out there who may have something better to say, maybe one of the priests that listen to the show might be able to help out. I don't know. Okay. Mark Van Ram says, here's an article that I thought you might find interesting on 2 types of pilot errors. And this is from defensetech.org. Navy researchers counter pilot disorientation with new simulations. Night landing Navy researchers have developed a new simulation and training program to help all Defense Department pilots avoid 2 potentially fatal spatial misperceptions during nighttime landings and in flight. Spatial disorientation is the leading aeromedical cause of Class A mishaps, not only throughout the Department of Defense aviation, but in commercial flying as well. Navy officials said in a report published this month in Naval Medical and Research Development News. Henry P. Williams, a researcher with the Naval Medical Research Unit Dayton at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, who reported on the program, said that they have been forwarded to the Naval Survival Training Institute in Pensacola, Florida. The phenomena include black hole illusion, or BHI, when a pilot on a nighttime runway approach in a poorly lit area perceives he is higher than he should be and descends to a lower approach. If unlit high terrain or obstacles are near the approach path, the results can be fatal. Let's see. The unit tested a team of 38 pilots in day and nighttime situation landings, finding that they all flew near perfect approaching in the daylight, but 92% made significantly low BHI approaches in the nighttime simulation. On average, they were 148 feet too low when on a 1.5 nautical mile final from the runway. But after viewing a training video on black hole illusion, the pilots were, on average, just 3 feet too low at the same distance from the runway. So they went from 148 feet low to 3 feet low after viewing the training video. And another spatial disorientation problem tackled in the same study was control reversal error, or CRE, which occurs when pilots lose visuals on a lead aircraft while making turns, as it happens flying into clouds. When that happens, pilots swap over to instrument control to recover from the turn, but in nearly a quarter of the cases, pilots turned in the wrong direction and steepened the angle of attack, researchers found. This error can be extremely dangerous in actual instrument flight, leading to incapacitating spatial disorientation and a fatal departure from controlled flight. And there's a link to the article in the show notes. Speaking of that, I meant to talk about this. Let me see if I still have it in my browser. Yeah, in flyingmagazine.com, flyingmag.com. The article here by Stephen Pope, published yesterday, says the National Transportation Safety Board's final report on the June 2012 in-flight breakup of a Pilatus PC-12 over Central Florida highlights the risks of flying a high-performance airplane in IMC with minimal training and experience. Weeks after the accident, the NTSB issued a safety alert to pilots warning about the inherent latency of in-cockpit NEXRAD weather images. By the way, any of you out there listening, relying on the NEXRAD imagery from various weather sources, they're generally a minimum of 4 to 5 minutes behind real time, so that if you're using this NEXRAD radar imagery to actually deviate around thunderstorms, be careful because you have to kind of interpolate where the storms will be moving when you are actually flying in that area. Again, they're at least 5 minutes, sometimes as much as 15 to 20 minutes old. So again, it's not real-time radar that you're looking at when you're using this NEXRAD imagery. If you have onboard radar, as we do in the airlines, then you are getting a real-time view of the weather and weather avoidance. Okay, so back to the article. The breakup happened in the vicinity of huge thunderstorms with extreme echoes, as reported by a controller to the accident pilot. Did the pilot inadvertently fly into one of these violent cells, leading to an in-flight breakup that claimed the lives of all 6 on board? No, not even close. As is so often the case, the probable cause involved a chain of interconnected events. Here's what really happened according to investigators. The pilot was climbing to his assigned altitude of flight level 260 on autopilot in IMC when he activated the propeller de-ice and inertial separator climbing through flight level 250. Another pilot nearby reported light rime icing at flight level 260. The pilot of the PC-12 did not activate the de-ice boots, suggesting that the icing wasn't much of a concern. After a minute later, ATC cleared the PC-12 to deviate right of course to avoid the towering embedded thunderstorms, which were still well ahead of the airplane. About 4 seconds into the turn, at an indicated airspeed of 109 knots and less than 25 degrees of bank, the autopilot disconnected for unknown reasons. At this point, the airplane began to roll right, descending and reaching a bank angle of about 50 degrees. Rather than take immediate control of the airplane and roll wings level, again, rather than doing the right thing and taking immediate control of the airplane and rolling the wings level, the pilot instead initiated a test of the autopilot system. It passed. By this point, however, the airplane had rolled into a 75-degree nose-down bank with the airspeed climbing through 335 knots, about 175 knots above the maximum operating maneuvering speed. At last, grasping the idea that he needed to do something, as the altitude tape spooled through 16,000 feet, so now he's lost about 10,000 feet, what did he do? He hauled back on the yoke, in the process tearing off both wings. The right wing ripped through the fuselage, ejecting 1 passenger. The bodies of the other 5 on board were recovered with the main wreckage in an open field. Post-accident examination of the controls and engine found no anomalies. The flaps were in the retracted position, but the gear was down, and the investigators hypothesized that the pilot put the gear down at some point during the descent. For reasons that could not be determined, the aileron trim was found in the nearly full left wing down position and the rudder trim full nose right. An aerodynamics performance study indicated that the wing did not stall, nor did the stick pusher activate prior to losing control. Icing was determined not to have been a factor. As far as the pilot's qualifications, they were questionable, although he had met the minimum legal requirements. Prior to purchasing the Pilatus, about 5 weeks earlier, the pilot had never logged any pilot and command time in turboprops, nor had he logged any actual IMC time in the preceding 7 years and 4 months. His last flight under the hood, which is nothing like real IMC, by the way, his last flight under the hood occurred 4 years and 7 months before the accident flight. After buying the Pilatus, the pilot attended simulator training, spending extra time to receive an instrument proficiency check, flight review, and high altitude endorsement. A pilot who trained with the accident pilot in the simulator told investigators he seemed to be behind the airplane. After 1 takeoff, he forgot to retract the landing gear and then flew through an altitude assignment of 1,500 feet. After training, the pilot flew the airplane about 14 hours before the accident flight, bringing his total pilot and command time experience to about 750 hours, most of it in piston singles. Why? It seems to me that this person was highly dependent on the autopilot system. And that when the autopilot stopped working, it disconnected, instead of hand flying the airplane and, recovering from the unusual attitude, he instead did a autopilot test, which is just baffling to me. And then tried to hook up the autopilot, and then finally he realizes, oh, I'm in 75 degrees of bank, my nose is low, I'm going through 335 knots, I've lost 10,000 feet, maybe I should do something. And of course, what does he do? The wrong thing. He pulls back and over-Gs the wings and breaks them off. Wow, that's sad. And what's really sad about this is that it doesn't say who was on board the airplane with him, but there were 6 people, 5 others besides him, that he killed. Very, very sad. But the reason why I'm reading this is because of the article that Mark Van Ram, Tim's brother, sent in regarding the control reversal error, or that that spatial disorientation that occurs when pilots lose visuals on lead aircraft. But this, of course, they're not flying formation. But when you're flying into clouds, you can get spatially disoriented, and you have to know what to do. That's why I can hammer and hammer and hammer. You got to know, which way to roll the wings to get the the airplane upright, and put the pitch where it should be, put the power where it should be. And as long as you know where all that is, you're going to be good as gold. And you have to. It's hard to describe to people that don't really have experience flying in instrument meteorological conditions. Your mind, your brain is thinking that you're doing something. You're getting these accelerations and G-forces and that kind of thing. And you're looking at your instruments and you're going, well, that can't be right. But you have to trust your instruments. And that's what you learn really early on in your flight training for instruments, is that you got to trust your instruments. They are telling you the truth, and you have to disregard any of those feelings that you have that you are not straight and level, that you're upside down or in a bank. I remember the first time I was in the T-37, we were going through weather, and I just thought that instructor pilot sitting next to me was just a god, because he was flying this airplane, and I swear we were like in a 60-degree bank, and we were going for the ground. But he was flying this airplane, we were straight and level, and everything was nice and stable, and I just couldn't get it out of my head that we were in that situation. It just felt completely different to me. And then, of course, it wasn't long before I, finally caged my attitude indicator in my head and got on with the program and understood that you got to trust your instruments. So, anyway, so I kind of see that there was a little bit of relation between those two things. So, thank you, Mark, for sending that feedback. More audio feedback, this time from Max. Great, I get a chance to rest my voice.
Hey, Captain Jeff, it's Max from Germany, and I would like to send you some feedback on the discussion about pilotless aircraft and the question whether a commercial aircraft carrying passengers could actually be flown by just a machine without any human pilots on board. Now, the autoflight systems do a great job at actually flying the plane, but we all know that aviating and flying is so much more than just manipulating the flight controls and moving the flight surfaces around. It's much more than that, and I think that one area where a machine is actually would be a lot inferior compared to a human pilot is aeronautical decision making. Now think about US Airways Flight 1549, for example, and its famous landing on the Hudson River. And now let's imagine for a second that this flight had taken off without Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Sykes on board, and had instead been flown by just a machine. So the plane climbs out shortly after, hits the flock of geese, and loses both engines. And one of the first thing that the flight crew had to determine is, can we make it back to LaGuardia without any engine power? Do we have enough energy for that? Is that something a machine could do? For example, let's say, at this speed, we have a glide ratio about 15:1. So for every mile of altitude we lose, we can travel 15 miles horizontally. We are at, let's say, 3,000 feet, LaGuardia is 7 miles away. Okay, no, we won't be able to make it back. Is that something a computer could do? Yes, of course. I mean, that's just a simple math problem, right? And that's what computers are great at, solving math problems. But the big question for me is, what would the machine have done after that? We, of course, all know what the flight crew did. They said, okay, we have to put the plane down in the Hudson River. We cannot make it back to LaGuardia. We cannot make it to Teterboro. And our best option is to land it in the river. And even though they knew that ditching a plane was an incredibly risky maneuver and hard to attempt, they still felt that it was their best option, and whilst of saving the airplane and simultaneously minimizing the risk for people on the ground. And then they were able to make that critical call and that decision, which was, I guess, a pretty hard decision to make, but they could do it. And I don't think that a machine in that situation could have done that, could have made that decision and also landed the plane in the river in the manner or in the way the flight crew, the human flight crew did. Because last time I checked, the Hudson River did not have an ILS system which could help the autoflight system perform an auto landing, right? So, and another area or another thing for me as a passenger, I would always prefer a human pilot in a cockpit. And the reason for that is a human pilot as a human being has just the same urge to stay alive like the other ones, like the passengers, right? I mean, they want to come home, they want to spend their life with their families. So in an emergency, I would much rather have somebody in the cockpit who wants to stay alive, because a machine does not care if it gets destroyed or not. Okay, that's it for my feedback. And yeah, before I forget, a little news about myself. I recently passed my private pilot check ride. And yeah, I can finally call myself a fellow pilot, I guess. And just in case if we don't talk to each other again before Christmas, I know it's still a few weeks out, but I want to send Merry Christmas to you and your whole family, including Cedric, your bird. That bird, I mean, he's such an attention seeker. You should probably get him his own podcast. And I would even subscribe to that podcast. So, Captain, I was about to say Captain Sallenberger. I mean, of course, Captain Jeff. Have a nice day. Merry Christmas. And thank you for your hard work in creating that podcast. See you soon.
Thank you, Max, for your fantastic feedback. And did you talk about Cedric? Oh, that's not Cedric. That's the Roadrunner. Anyway, again, applause for, congratulations for your becoming a pilot. Awesome. That's great news. And I'm glad that you shared it with us. And great. I agree 100% with everything you said in your feedback. You know, that the bottom line is that humans' ability, and I talked about it on the last show as well, humans' ability to analyze the situation, to try to, especially when it's presented with something that was never presented with before. You know, you can program computers to do and analyze many things, but you can't think of absolutely everything that could possibly happen. And so that's what's great about the human mind. We can adapt to situations and come up with solutions that a computer cannot. And no, you know, that Sullenberger accident, the miracle on the Hudson, or whatever you want to call it, no, that airplane would not have landed in the Hudson. Now, some people may say, well, if a computer were in control, it would have calculated that, yes, it could make the LaGuardia airport, or it could have made Teterboro. And in post-incident simulations, they have proven that that could have happened. But Sully made that decision, as well as First Officer Sykes, that this was the best thing to do at the time, based on all the information that they had at the time, and they did the right thing. Everybody survived. So, but as I mentioned in the last episode, several other instances where if it had not been for humans in that cockpit with that sense of survival, of making things happen that they weren't expecting, those would have been tragedies as well, complete losses. The machine doesn't care. The machine will do whatever you programmed it to do. It'll analyze the situation and do the best to do all its calculations and provide safety for the passengers, but you got to have a human up there. You just have to. Sorry, there's no other way to look at it. So thank you, Max, for that. Your great feedback, and again, congratulations. Okay, let's continue. Oh, he said he had a correction. He said, I just made a fool out of myself in front of your millions of listeners. Okay, well, I don't have millions, maybe hundreds of thousands. That's funny. In my feedback on pilotless aircraft, I said that a glide ratio of 15-to-1 at a height of 3,000 feet, the plane could not have glided 7 nautical miles. After doing the calculation, I realized that, in fact, it could have glided 7 nautical miles and a bit, at least from a purely mathematical standpoint. I'm always a bit nervous when recording audio feedback, and I just gave out a random number which seemed right to me. I hope you and all the other expert aviators will forgive me. Well, you're forgiven, Max. You know, my mom told me never to do public math, and that's what you did, and you did it very well, and so it was just a little off. But I don't think anybody would have noticed until you and now me brought it up. But there you go. And his email signature is DS Nachricht werde von meinem Android Mobiltelefon mit GMX Mail gesendet. I think that says something about this was using Android mobile telephone with GMX mail send or something like that. Anyway, let's move on. Kevin writes, I'm a private pilot from Indiana. Jim Platzer, the blind pilot you mentioned on episode 145, completed his flight at my home airport, Smith Field. It was very inspiring and great to have such positive media coverage at a GA airport. I was cleaning some stuff out the other day and I came across an old die-cast plane from when I was a kid. It's not in Acme livery, but I think you'll recognize the model. There don't seem to be many of these die-casts around, and I thought you might enjoy a picture. So he sent me a picture of this die-cast model, and is the venerable L-1011 TriStar made by Lockheed in Pan Am colors. Very cool. Thank you, Kevin, for sending it. Nice. Frick says, first off, Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thank you, Frick. And then he said, next, I saw this on YouTube. And let's see, let's listen to a little bit of it here, if we can get some sound. Okay, we got to turn a little
In an airplane with white wings, you know that shining a flashlight out there to see if there's ice doesn't really cut it. A company called Safe Flight has a solution to that.
The Safe Flight Ice and Conditions Detector is an integrated optical moisture transducer and temperature sensor. From these two signals, we provide rapid indication of whether the aircraft has entered icing conditions within 2 seconds in typical conditions. The way it works is we use...
Anyway, you want to see the nice video and pictures of this Safe Flight ice detector. I'm not sure how much it costs, but might be a nice thing to have on your airplane if you have your own airplane. And I'll have a link to this YouTube video in the show notes, and you can check it out yourself. So thank you, Frick, for sending me that information. Matt, let's see, he gave me a pronunciation. Marchinson. Matt Marchinson says, I've been listening to your show for some time now, and I absolutely hate it. I can't stand... Oh, wait a minute. Let me read. Oh, no. He says he absolutely loves it. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I finally decided I should participate and leave some feedback. I have a few questions for you. Do you frequently have passengers that ask to see the flight deck? No, hardly ever anybody asks me that. I've never mustered enough courage to do so on a flight. What would be the best way to go about requesting to see the cockpit? Well, just poke your head into the cockpit and say, hey, I'm an aviation enthusiast, or I'm a pilot, or whatever. And I love flying, and do you mind if I get a little tour of your cockpit? Could you show me around? Whatever. And most of us would say, oh, absolutely. We love it when passengers show an interest in our office. So that's what I would do. Let's see. What would be the best way? Okay. I've noticed that, okay, they're talking about another airline. Delta is always written as Delta Airlines as opposed to Delta Airlines, all one word, the airlines part. Do you know why this is? It seems that all other airlines contain the single word airlines, all air and line, like all in the same word in their name. Oh, then he goes on. I was listening to an episode in which you mentioned that there is a first officer that you frequently fly with. Would it be possible for you to interview him on the show? Yeah, but it's kind of too late now. I'm not even sure who I was talking about, actually. What happens is, they're on this airplane in Atlanta, the MD-88, MD-90, in the Atlanta base they're each position. So we have like over 600 captains and almost that same number of first officers. So let's say 1,200, 1,300 pilots in total. But what happens is that the kind of trips that you fly, especially if you're senior, tend to be the same types of trips, during the same days, basically. So, typically I'll fly 3 or 4 day trips, Monday through Friday, during that, and weekends off, and early in the day, and, as few legs as possible so I can get to the layover as soon as possible and have time to record the show. So that kind of trip is the kind of trip I like to fly. And it turns out that I end up flying with co-pilots that are about the same seniority, relatively so, in their seat, that like the same type of trip. So you end up flying with a subset of co-pilots out there. So probably, 50 out of the 500 to 600 co-pilots out there, I tend to fly more with a smaller group because they like the same sort of trips. And so that's what I meant by that. And I don't remember who I was talking about. So, but I do, by the way, carry with me an extra microphone and I think I have an extra microphone cable. Better make sure about that because I would need it, that I can connect to my audio recorder and have like a co-pilot on my show, as I did in episode, what was it, 90 or 99, when we had Tony, not his real name, join me on the recording of that episode when we were in Charleston. So yeah, I always look for that opportunity to see if anybody wants to, shows an interest in being on the show and wants to help me out. And so yeah, maybe I'll have that kind of experience again sometime soon. So thank you, Matt, for asking me about that. And he goes on to say, you don't have to read this on the air if you don't wish to. And a little bit about myself. I am in my senior year at the University of Buffalo studying mechanical and aerospace engineering. I hold a private pilot certificate and have about 80 hours, most of them in a Cessna 172 with G1000 cockpit. You've inspired me to continue pursuing a career as a professional pilot. I was excited to come across some episodes that you recorded while on layover in Buffalo. Do you have any trips coming up that include a stop in Buffalo? I don't think I do the rest of this month, Matt, but probably in January and February, there'd be a good chance because it seems like I'm always in Buffalo in the winter. If so, please let me know. I would love to have the opportunity to meet you in person. Yeah, maybe we should have a Buffalo meetup sometime in the future. So anyway, getting back to your first question about the airspace lines and airlines, all one word. Well, you may have heard me state that in previous shows that I am a line flying or a line pilot. And what that means is, as opposed to a management pilot or a line check airman or some kind of that kind of a status pilot or a simulator pilot, I'm just out there flying trips, flying the line. What does that mean? Line. Well, you may have heard of shipping lines. We have ocean liners that fly the ocean lines, rail lines. So I think that part of the etymology of the word airline comes from transportation, starting with seaborne transportation, the shipping lines, and then rail transportation, the rail lines. And then the airplanes came on, and guess what? They flew airlines. And you might also want to think about it as, have you ever looked at the the map in the back of Sky magazine or one of those in-flight magazines that shows that the airline that you're flying on and their route system, and they have all these lines that are big curved, arcing lines that go from Los Angeles to Dallas, and Dallas to Salt Lake City, and Salt Lake City to Atlanta, Atlanta to New York, etc. Those are the lines of that company. That company flies. So that's another possible source of the name or word line. Those are the routes that an airline flies. And and I think airline was first used in 1813, well before the first flight, meaning a beeline or a straight line between 2 points on the Earth's surface, as through the air rather than over terrain. And later in the 19th century, it was especially in reference to railways that ran directly between big cities in the U.S. instead of meandering from town to town. And so, of course, when airplanes came online, we have the air lines. We also have, and I mentioned this before, that I would have a quiet house for the first part of the show. And then the last part of the show, all bets were off. And I hear that one or both of my daughters have arrived home, and they are using the bathroom facilities in my house. And I'm down here in the basement underneath all the lines, all the plumbing lines. So I do apologize for that sound if you're hearing it. So let's move on. So as far as, so that's what an airline is. But I know that wasn't your specific question. Your specific question was, what? Okay, I get the airline thing, but why do some airlines like Delta say airline as two separate words, and most other companies merge those two words together? And the reason for that is just the evolution of language and kind of style and being old-fashioned or modern. For instance, if you've ever read some older works, you might notice that instead of saying today, they say as one word, they say to space day, sometimes to hyphen day. Same thing with morrow, to space morrow, or to hyphen morrow. But now in our modern language, those words are today and tomorrow, all one word. The same thing has happened over time with airlines. And some companies have just decided that, nope, we're going to stand by tradition. When we started, we were blank airlines, Acme Airlines, and we haven't changed it. So, I mean, even some companies have gone to Airways. Some of the early companies were Air Service, etc. But I think it's just a function of, or a matter of the evolution of language, especially English, over the years, where it just seems to be constantly changing. I mean, think about it in today's world. We have all kinds of words now that used to be separate, and now they're combining them all together, like Facebook. Let's see, what's some other example? A website. You might write website in your word processor, and then it goes, oh, that's a misspelling. It should be separate web and site, two words. But more and more, it's being accepted as one word, website, WEBSITE, instead of two separate words. So again, it's just the evolution of our language. And some people have said, or some companies have said, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get all modern on the folks. I'm going to leave it the way it's always been, which is two separate words. So that's my take on airlines versus airlines. Hope that helped, Matt. And thanks for your feedback. And hope to see you someday in Buffalo. And this is something that just came in since I actually started recording. So I'm going to see what Nick Carson has to say. Lights on, lights off. Good day, Captain Jeff. I have a few questions. Why does the cabin crew dim and or turn off the cabin lights for takeoff and landing? It is because of, in case we have some kind of a emergency evacuation or even a crash on takeoff and landing, so that eyes are acclimated to the darkness if it's early in the morning or late at night or in the middle of the night. So we don't have those bright cabin lights on And then all of a sudden we crash and there is no light at all. And it just, we'd have to adapt or adopt to our night vision. And so it's just our way of helping people get their night vision so that if something bad happens, they'll be more acclimated to the lower light conditions. Now, I think we should take at Acme it one step further, as many airlines do around the world, and let's have our window shades up for takeoff and landing, at least, so that we can kind of help analyze what condition our airplane is in after we may have an incident or an accident, or what our attitude is, not whether we have a good attitude or a bad attitude, but whether we're upside down or sideways or whatever. But that's the reason for the cabin lighting. What do all those blue, green, and other multicolored lights on the taxiways and runways mean when they are lit up at night? They all have meanings. The white lights are associated with runways. The blue lights are associated with taxiway edges, or the edges of the taxiways. The green lights are the center lines of the taxiways. Lots of beautiful colored lights though out there, aren't there? Red lights are generally like, don't cross this. That's something critical. Like you'll see red lights when you're approaching a hold bar for a runway, an active runway. But essentially that's it. Anytime you see white lighting, it's runway associated. Yellow, that's caution. Again, you might see amber or yellow as you're approaching a runway. Red means, don't proceed past this point. The blue lights are usually the edge lights of taxiways, and the green are the center lines of taxiway lighting. So you can probably find out more about those by just doing a search for runway/taxiway lighting on Google or Bing or whatever you want to use, and I'm sure you'll find some good resources on all the different types of lighting. And he says, I hope those questions are simply enough for you to answer. Yeah, they're simple. Wishing you Scano and Cavu to you. And I've already forgotten what SCAWNO means, Nick, sorry. But I do know that what Cavu means, so thank you, sir. And then some audio feedback from Jim Solblad in Sweden, or from Swedish Jim. And it's audio feedback, so I have not listened to this, so we're both listening to this together. Here we go.
Hello, Jeff. This is Swedish Jim again. I am just about finished reading the book that you recommended, The Understanding Air France 447. I gotta say, it's a great book, and actually, it's quite frightening to realize what was going on in that cockpit during those fateful hours. So my question to you is, what is your conclusion about what happened in the cockpit? What was the real cause of it all happening? Or at least what the main cause was? Because as we used to say, disaster is always like a chain reaction of multiple things happening leading to the big disaster. But from your point of view, can you see what was the main reason for the disaster to happen? That would be interesting to hear you collaborate about. I'm sorry if you're getting tired of the Air France 447 questions and the whole incident, but I still think it's very interesting. And I'm having trouble to analyze the accident, because where it all ends up is basically it's pilot error, but the pilots are still working with a machine that's not designed to be as forgiving as it should be. I mean, there's a video where you can see an animation of the last minutes of the plane and the control inputs from the pilots, what they did, and you can clearly see that one of the pilots he did everything wrong, basically. Where you should pull your nose down and go out of the stall, he pushed the nose up, and he must have gotten the wrong impression of what was going on. That's pretty clear, I guess. Thrust was set at max, But of course, that didn't help if you were to keep pushing that nose up all the time. And that leads me to another question. What are you taught if you were to engage in a higher altitude stall? Would you lower your nose as a first action, or would you go to tow-go thrust? Would you just hit the maximum thrust and try to get yourself out of the stall that way, or would you lower your nose as a first action? Because as from what I understand, they changed these recommendations to get out of stall. You need to lower your nose first, and then when the plane is under control, you pull maximum thrust. So, all right. So thanks again for a great podcast, Jeff, and I wish you very, very good smelling tailwinds and calm weathers.
Thank you very much. And as I said, this is the first time I've heard this feedback because it came in while after I started recording today's show. And so just off the top of my head, thank you for your feedback and your wishes at the very end. Thank you, Jim. It is baffling, this accident. But before I answered that part, the part about if I encountered a high altitude stall, you asked whether I would first put the power in or lower the nose. And my initial reaction to that question would be both. I would immediately do both, lower the nose and put the power in. But if I had to choose one or the other, which would be more critical, I would say lowering the nose first, getting the angle of attack reduced so that the wind is flowing over the wings and providing lift. That's critical. And then I would worry about the power if I had to make a choice. But I think that my initial instinctive reaction would be to do both, power in and lower the nose. What do I think really happened? Yes, it was pilot error. It was triggered by a mechanical problem to begin with, but why the pilot error? And I think there are several factors. One, the pilot's limited experience of manually flying an airplane, maybe his basic understanding of fundamental aerodynamics, and understanding of stalls and aerodynamics. The training that he received perhaps might be a factor. But one of the things that really bothers me, and this is one of these things I really grapple with, because we talk about this at Acme Airlines because we have a fleet of a mix of Boeings and McDonnell Douglas and Airbus in our fleet. And our airline just announced a big order of Airbuses. So we're bringing, that mix is shifting, and it looks like it may be shifting over time as mostly an Airbus fleet that my airline uses. And it might be that I may be faced one of these days with having to make the decision whether to fly an Airbus product or not. And so what is my problem with Airbus airplanes? I think they're beautiful airplanes. I think they're built wonderfully. I think they are, I just don't like the philosophy that Airbus has when it comes to the pilot machine interface. And I think really, for me, the real reason that Air France 447 crashed was one of the big reasons is the human machine interface and the philosophy at Airbus, and as opposed to, let's say, Boeing's philosophy when it comes to human machine interface. And I've mentioned this before in previous shows, that when Boeing came out with the 777, it's a fly-by-wire control system, as is the Dreamliner, the 787. They had the opportunity at that point to adopt the same style or type of controls that Airbus adopted when it came up with the Airbus 320 series and the 330 series, the 340 series, 380 series, the side stick controller. But they didn't choose to go that direction because they thought that the conventional controls, the kind of controls that are in between your legs, that move in in sequence with each other, and they are tied to each other. So if the control yoke in front of me, if I pull it back on the airplane that I fly, or any Boeing, if you look over at my first officer's control yoke, his is moving back too. If I turn the control yoke to the left for a left bank, his control wheel turns in that same direction. Throttles, we don't just put them into a certain detent and then the engines do their own thing. We actually activate the power of the engines with the throttles, and they assume a position in reference to the position of the thrust that is being supplied by the engine. So when you're taking off, those throttles are way forward. When you come in for landing, they're all the way back. When you're in cruise, they're somewhere in the middle of those two things. And so you have that, even if the throttles aren't really physically connected to the engines, if it's a full electronic authority kind of situation, a FADEC control system where the position of the throttle is being relayed to the fuel control unit of the engines, but it's still showing the representative position of where the throttles are in relation to the thrust of the engine. Whereas in the Airbus, it doesn't work that way. They decided to go a different direction. So I don't think that if this had been a Boeing 777 instead of an Airbus 330, I don't think this accident would have occurred, because the more experienced first officer sitting in the captain's position at that point would have looked over, not even looked over, he would have seen this big control yoke in his lap, and seeing a very high nose attitude and seeing a very high rate of descent. And he would have immediately said, wait a minute, what are you doing? We're in a stall. You need to push the yoke forward to get the nose down so we can get some air flowing over these wings and recover from the stall. But he didn't know that the first officer sitting in the right seat, the pilot flying, had that control stick all the way back, all the way aft. In the Boeing, trim does not trim automatically. You actually activate a trim switch to relieve the pressures on the control, whether they're real pressures or simulated pressures. You have to manually trim the airplane. So you always have that interface, that human machine interface, to me, makes more sense. Whereas the Airbus product, you push the pull the stick all the way back, the airplane goes, okay, I'll go ahead and trim the pressures off for you there. In fact, I don't even think there is any manual feedback that you get from that stick. I'm not sure. I've never flown an airplane with that side stick controller, so I'm not sure about that. But so he's holding this thing all the way back, and the airplane's going, the computers are going, okay, we'll go ahead and trim that for you, so we won't have to hold that pressure. And so it trimmed all the way full nose up, which was the wrong thing to do. The first officer sitting, pilot monitoring, the guy that had more experience, doesn't have any idea that the guy actually flying the airplane is doing that. And when the captain comes back in the cockpit, he has no idea either. He doesn't see the control yoke back in their laps. He doesn't see the control sticks either. He doesn't know what's going on. And they're not connected to each other. So the only warning they get is at one point, one of them is pushing the control stick in one direction, or the side stick controller, and the other one has got it in the opposite direction, and there's some kind of a warning that they're dual stick inputs, or forgot what the exact warning is. But again, I just don't, the irony is that Airbus claims that their philosophy, their system of automation and interface with humans is safer because it keeps you out of situations like this. But that's grand if everything works. But when the airspeed indications, 2 out of the 3 airspeed indicators, were giving erroneous information, the computers decided that, well, I can't rely on airspeed information, so I don't know what to tell you. You basically have control of the airplane. So they went from normal law to alternate or direct law. So it wasn't there to hold their hand and keep them from getting in a bad situation. And that guy that had very little experience, maybe not a very good understanding of basic fundamental flying and aerodynamics, did the complete wrong thing, and the computer let him do it because it basically said, I'm not getting any good information from your airspeed, so I can't help you. You're on your own. You're going to have to rely on your basic skills. Unfortunately, his basic skills weren't good enough to get him out of that situation. And unfortunately, the controls were arranged such that there was no way that anybody knew that he was doing the wrong thing. So for all those reasons, I really it's troubling for me to, consider flying one of their products, because I just don't like that philosophy. Again, I think, and I've stated this before, that the real trouble is not automation, and the real trouble is not human flying skills. The trouble is integrating the two so that we get the best use of automation and we understand what the automation is doing. And it's that interface between humans and machines that has to improve. That is going to be the critical breakthrough for safety, in my opinion. And I just think the Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, all the other airlines out there, aircraft manufacturers out there, their philosophy of this interface is better than Airbus's. And again, that may change over time. I may change my tune. Maybe one of these days I'll be flying the Airbus and I'll say, you know what, it's the best thing since sliced bread. But again, I think that is the problem. We have to do something to improve the interface between humans and machines. That's the best I can do just off the top of my head. Thank you, Swedish Jim, for your feedback. And I guess that is it for today's show. Let me get my glasses back on here. Look at the time, and just under 2 hours. So that's a pretty decent show, I think. A little bit longer than the last two. And I'm sure that as the holidays wear on, that they'll start getting longer again for those of you who love the long episodes. Just a reminder, the airlinepilotguy.com site is where you'll find information about me, other shows, how you can listen to this audio podcast. If you're one of those watching me right now on YouTube, you can find out all about that and how you can subscribe via iTunes. And by the way, thank you so much for all of you who have taken the time to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, to leave me comments and reviews on iTunes. It really does help. It keeps me up in the popularity rankings of iTunes. And do I care about popularity? No, but it makes it easier for people to find quality aviation shows. And there are a great number of them out there. And I'm not going to name all of them because I'm sure I'll leave somebody's out. And I don't want to upset anybody, but there are a huge number of fantastic aviation podcasts out there. And I just want mine to be up there somewhere amongst the great ones. And the way we can do that is by subscribing, number one, to iTunes. Even if you don't, use iTunes or any other podcatcher to download the shows to your phone or your iPod or whatever you're using to listen to shows. If you're just one of those who would like to go to the site and hit the play button, or you'd like to watch me on YouTube, that's fantastic. I love that. But just take a couple minutes, if you don't mind, head over to iTunes and just subscribe, and then it'll show up as another subscription. And if you have the time, leave a review. That'd be fantastic, and that just kind of makes it more people aware when they're searching for aviation podcasts that mine is there. So thanks for all of you who have done that, and for all of those who will consider doing it in the future. All right, I really didn't expect to spend that much time talking about iTunes. Sorry about that. So what else can you find on the Airline Pilot Guide? The Arash is doing great things there. He started the APG community, kind of little Facebook kind of thing, APG Center or something like that. What's it called? I forget already. Just go over to airlinepilotguy.com and check it out. You can learn more about the coffee fund, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. Ways to contact me. The best way, as always, feedback at airlinepilotguy.com, or you can use the feedback form on the website. A lot of you send me great audio feedback by using your smartphone or your tablet or whatever, and recording feedback and attaching it to the email sent to feedback at airlinepilotguy.com. Yeah, that's enough yakking about that. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this somewhere and you want to know more about some of these things I talked about on the show, head over to airlinepilotguy.com. Finally, hope that everybody's is enjoying their holiday this time of year so far, and I hope everybody's happy. And wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care and God bless. All right. So let me go back over here to the Hangout. And it's you and me. We're just us video folks. The audio podcast is over, and hopefully this worked out well. Sometimes it really depends on the bandwidth. If I have low bandwidth or other people in the house are using the bandwidth, sometimes the video is not very clear or the audio is not very clear. So hopefully that sounded good to you out there. And let's see, at the end here, I usually have a scrolling list of those who have contributed to the Airline Pilot Guy Coffee Fund via Patreon. At a certain level, your name will show up in the scrolling show notes at the end of the video, and I hope that I can get that attached to the end of this one, because it's a Hangout on air. I'm not sure about that, so I'll see. I'll do my best. If not, I'll do a verbal scrolling of those who use Patreon to support the show. How about that? So let me head over here to the patron manager of Patreon. And let's see, Asa Arming, Aaron Rui, Tarat Ranganathan, Puskar Renate, Michael Toledo, Chris Bond, Justin Williams, Lee Hayden, Lee Morgan, Daniel Matiz, John Colapi, Tom Seagraves, and others. But those are the ones that have indicated that they want to have that little perk of seeing their names scrolling by. Hopefully you're seeing those names scroll by, or you will in a moment. If not, there's your verbal credit roll at the end of Airline Pilot Guy episode 146. Best I could do, just off the top of my head. And thank you to all of you who listen, who send feedback, who send money, and do all those things. Really, my life wouldn't be the same without all of you. So I do appreciate it, honestly. So until next time, have a great week and a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next week on Airline Pilot Guy. Take care and God bless.